sleeper must awake.
While preparing for today's episode, I was thinking maybe I should have like a kind of a fake campfire in front of me for this interview, because if you know today's guest, you know that he's an amazing storyteller, very captivating. And yeah, I probably should have had this little campfire because my light died slowly during the interview, so I was just more and more in the dark, which you won't mind if you're listening to this on audio. But yeah, so today's guest, Mike Clelland, aka Owl Man. Dude, I wish I had a cool nickname like that. Yeah, well, I don't have a cool nickname, but my name is Dominic. I'm the host of this Hopscotch Chronicles podcast. This is episode 10 with the Owl Man himself. So it was cool having him on because, and I knew it would be cool. I'm new at this, but apparently have a great nose for finding great guests. And because I approached Mike because although he has all those wild stories and they can be very entertaining, and I think a lot of people listen to him because of that, and I know, like, for sure, like, I'm entertained by his stories too. But to me, it's more than that. And although Mike doesn't consider himself a mystic, which he'll say in the interview, I would respectfully disagree with him. Although, yeah, I mean, it's a word, and we all have our definitions for them. But he used the term seeker, and that's what, to me, what transpires the most out of his work. The way that he speaks about all the accounts and the experiences that he's gathered over the years, and mostly his own experiences, the way he speaks about them, for sure, this guy's in it for real. I mean, in the sense that through those experiences, he's exploring and questioning the nature of this reality, which to me is a very important part of the mystic's path, you know. So I knew that I wouldn't just be speaking with someone who would tell us interesting campfire stories, but it would be possible to go a bit deeper than that. And this is what happened, and it was such a cool chat for me. Longest episode yet. And I didn't even need all the dozens of questions that I had prepared. It was just a natural flow, natural discussion, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I did. So let me read the little bio that I prepared for Mike, hoping that it will represent him accurately. So, although Mike Clelland is an expert in skiing, climbing, mountain travel, and ultralight backpacking, as well as being a talented professional illustrator, today we're talking to the author, the researcher, and more specifically, the seeker. Among the many books he's written, his 2015 effort called The Messengers, in which the mysterious connection between owls, synchronicities, and UFO abductions is explored, has been met with high praise. To this day, Mike has collected thousands of accounts of people's anomalous events, as well as sharing his own transformative experiences, and for many years now has been recognized as an expert in this field. More recently, Mike Clelland has published a first fiction novel, a paranormal thriller titled The Unseen, which has already gathered a large amount of great reviews. Although he's lived for many years in the Rockies, Mike joins us today from his home in Seattle. There you go. I hope that was good. All right, so I won't be long today. I'm at 6 minutes. That's good. So yeah, I won't bug you too much with the Patreon because I realize now how many people have them. So if you like the show and you want to encourage me doing the show, just go on patreon.com/Dominic Vallée. I try to put as much as I can on there. So yeah, for like exclusive material for Patreons. And you also, you get the shows in there like almost as soon as the interview is done. You get a raw, unedited version of the show almost immediately. So sometimes you'll get them way before they come out in their official version. So yeah, patreon.com/Dominic Vallée. You can check me out on Twitter, check me out on Instagram. Like the video if you like it. Click that little thing. It's free and it helps a lot. And subscribe to the channel. We're at 61 subscribers now, which seems like very little, but I think like we've been it's quintupled over the last few weeks. So I'm happy with 61, but would be more happy with a lot more. So yeah, subscribe and comment. Also comment your impressions, whether positive or negative, and I will read and reply. So yeah, let's get on with it. Let's proceed with the interview. Who? Hello, Mike Clelland. I'm so happy to talk with you today. As I was telling you before we started recording, for me this podcast and all the people I'm approaching to have them on, for me most of them are kind of like little superstars for me because I've listened to you for so long, and it's always a bit surreal to speak with people that haven't talked back, for so many years. So thank you for being here.
It's my honor. And just so you know, we talked a little bit before the show started, but I had my own podcast. I started in 2009, which is, good God, 15 years ago. And the reason I started it is because I wanted to talk to people in the field. And I didn't feel like I could just call up Richard Dolan or Whitley Strieber or these, Brad Steiger, these characters that I looked up to. And so I said, "Oh, would you be on my podcast?" And they all said yes. Mm-hmm. So it was great, and it was totally normal, and they were great guests, and the shows turned out great. So, so I recognize that completely, like the having the, how to say it, like the democratization, like it's of this kind of communication, where before you would have had to work at a radio station and be a DJ, or you work at a TV station, and so you would have been in a room with $200,000 worth of gear, and now it can all be done for just plugging into your laptop, really. Yeah. So
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So we're an amazing chapter of history. Oh, and I do not think of myself as a mystic. I do think of myself as a seeker. I feel like I'm seeking rather than I'm seeking, and then I have enjoyed being the center point of these owl stories. Like, not the center point, but people are sending me these owl stories. I'm receiving these owl stories, and it has been a remarkable experience doing that. And it wouldn't do anyone any good if I just put all these stories away in a file cabinet. So that's the reason I'm open and talking about them, because I realize there's a powerful, deeper story embedded within those owl stories. I don't know if people know who I am on your site, but
probably not. Well, I mean, probably not. I don't know who no, actually, I'm going to reverse. I'm going to say, since I'm not known yet, most people are going to come to hear you. So that's why I was wondering, like, should I ask him to say who he is and what got him into the field and the, what was her name? Kristen story?
Kristen,
stuff.
Yeah.
But but you've told it so many times. And it's all out there. Like, it's super easy to find. So I thought, like, maybe just, tell people about your work, the kind of work that you do, maybe. And, I didn't want to control it too much and maybe let you say what you feel is most important about the kind of work you do. And
so it's 2024 right now. Yikes. And I had a lifetime of odd experiences. And then the owl experiences started in 2006. And that would be the story with Kristen, which is a story I've told a million times. I don't need to tell it again. It's easy to find out there. It's the first opening chapter of of 2 books. Actually, I wrote 2 books, and I had to tell that same story twice because to really understand completely, it's helpful to know that one, but it's pretty easy to find. So I had a bunch of owl experiences. I started a blog. I started a podcast. And because of these powerful owl experiences, we just saw owls in the woods. 3 owls. It was a lot of owls. It was a magical experience. It happened twice. And it really shook both of us, shook me more than her. She said, like, you really went kind of nuts on this. And I was like, oh, I know I did. And, but I managed to write about it on the blog. When I started the blog, it was just going to be about synchronicities, like the synchronistic experiences of, like, I have a lot of synchronicities. So, and synchronicities are a nice blog post, right? They're short. They got a little punchline. They're like telling a little short dream in a way. So, and that the podcast the blog, which started in 2009, very quickly turned into UFO stories and owl stories. And then I started asking people, hey, if you have any interesting owl stories, I want to hear them. And it was mostly in conjunction with UFOs, especially at the beginning. Ooh, the sun just came out. That doesn't happen. I'm in Seattle. That doesn't happen very often. So, I very quickly started collecting people's owl stories. And then I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, there's a kind of a mood and a vibe to these stories. And so the number is, people say, well, how many owl stories do you have? And I'm like, oh, geez, Louise, like, many, many thousands. And it's tough because some of them are just people will say, hey, I saw a pretty owl in the back fence, and it was really a nice experience. And I'm like, well, that's all nice. That doesn't count. But so I have been collecting what amount to mystical experiences with owls. Or let's say, the term I feel is better is highly charged human event. Yeah. So they connect to a highly charged human event. And it started with UFOs, and then all of a sudden these other things came in. I should do this off the top of my head. Meditation, psychedelics, particularly mushrooms. I got some other examples, but they're mostly mushrooms. Shamanic initiation. People who go through the shamanic initiation process see owls. Owls and death. People see owls. I got a beautiful letter just a couple days ago about someone who had a powerful experience after her husband died. And what I'm finding is here, I'll just, the owls and death thing, this is important. What I'm in the folklore is, if you hear an owl hooting, it means someone died, right? That is like, owls hoot all the time. So that's a tough one. But like if an owl comes to your house and has an ominous hooting, it's like, oh, who died? And that's right in Shakespeare. That's right in, like, oftentimes in movies. I catch it all the time. Like just before the phone rings, before someone gets the news of there'll be a hooting of an owl. Or before someone dies, it's right there, which is, oh wow, it did get bright in here, which is right out of the ancient folklore transposed to modern cinema. And so those 5 things, UFOs, death, meditation, psychedelics, and shamanic initiation, those 5 things, there's some outlying stuff, but there's not enough to really call it a pattern. So I'm at the point now where I do not connect owls to UFOs necessarily. I connect owls to the highly charged human experience, of which seeing a UFO or having direct UFO contact certainly qualifies as a highly charged human experience. So it's not that the owls are connected to UFOs, it's more that the owls are connected to these highly charged events in people's lives. So what's been happening is I get these letters, I archive them, I try to keep a log of how the dates and files, and oh my gosh, it's an uphill battle. I feel like I'm walking uphill in sand sometimes. I'm getting many, 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 many more letters than I can keep up with. And then what happened is, I got them right on the desk here. So at the, oops, I don't have all of them. In 2015, I published a book called The Messengers. A lot of that was straight out of my blog. Like I had been writing articles in my blog. So I had a good amount of stuff ready to go. And then that book made kind of a splash in a way, where it was kind of a interesting take on the UFO issue, framing it all as owls. Now, I didn't invent the issue with owls. Lots of other UFO researchers certainly recognized the pattern. And there's, in a lot of UFO books, there's a few sentences, maybe a paragraph about owls. And but I'm the one who wrote a 400-page book on the owl and UFO thing, footnoting a lot of those books that had already mentioned them. And that turned into a second book, and then a third book, and then I wrote a fiction book. So there's like 4 big fat books that are like you stack them all up. I mean, this is close to, this is kind of the thing, like you stack them all up. That's like, there's 2 of the same book, but that would be about the thickness of them. So people say, like, after I did the 3 books, people would say, "Hey, you gonna write another book about owls?" And I'm like, "Nope." Like if I couldn't say it in 1,000 pages, like it's not going to do anyone any good to write another 300 pages, basically saying the same thing I said the first 1,000 pages. So, but I did wrote a fiction book, and there's plenty of owls in the fiction book. So, and that was a really fun exercise to kind of look at it through a different lens like that. So, as far as what I'm doing, this is so that UFO subject. If no one knows anything about the UFO subject, you know enough that there's like government conspiracies, and then there's like Air Force files, and then there's the pop culture stuff for the X-Files, and then there's the people who think they have been touched by, they're space angels from the Pleiades and are now channeling eternal goodliness. They make a pretty good case of it at times. And then there's people who feel like they're like being abducted by demonic, sinister aliens, and then their life is a mess. And so that's part of it too. I don't want to. So there's like these conflicting, contrasting things. So it's this huge continuum of stuff. But I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at this one little teeny narrow thread, which is the UFO issue. The majority of my stuff is still owls and UFO. But I'm really happy when I get a letter that doesn't have anything to do with the UFO stuff. So and so I'm pulling on that one little thread of just owls. And what I'm finding is so rich and so rewarding And people ask me all the time, are owls good or bad? I'm like, well, like that's a tough one to answer. Like I could make a case. I could take the available data and say owls are benevolent and wonderful, and they represent the goodness of the UFO occupant. In order to do that, I would have to willfully ignore huge amounts of data. Mm-hmm. So if you look at it all, what I can say is woven within it, there is a hopeful, that's the best word I can come up with, a hopeful aspect woven into the owl thing. People who have owl experiences are often confronted with a challenge. Like coming forward or coming to terms with their UFO experience is a challenge. So that shows up, the challenge shows up. And then there was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, and I've talked to other researchers about this because I was at a UFO conference, and it's very common. I notice a pattern. People say, oh, I had this, you're like, real simple. Walking through the woods, there's an owl on a tree. I look up at the owl, like, what a pretty owl. How weird that I saw an owl so close. The owl flies off. Moments later, a flying saucer goes right over there, like a classic shiny flying saucer goes right over their head. So UFO, owl, co-joined in one event. That is very common. And then you talk to these people and they're like, oh, well, what's going on? You're like, oh, this and that. And then they're like, oh, I had a spiritual awakening. And you're like, great. So you write that down in your little notes, and then you write that down 100 times, and you kind of realize, oh, there's something going on. And I was at a conference, and I had a slide that said spiritual awakening, big fat letters, spiritual awakening. I was going to click the button, and the slide was going to say spiritual awakening. I was going to say, I have noticed a pattern in the people who contact me with their owl experiences. They claim to have had spiritual awakening. Like, I can't, how do you quantify that? Like, they are telling me that. I got to trust them like a reporter rather than I'm not a scientist.
Yeah.
So I'm just anecdotally reporting this stuff. Now, I was at a conference and I had my laptop and had one slide that said spiritual awakening. I had this moment of insecurity. I'm like, oh God, is this right? Maybe that's a bold thing to say in front of an audience. Mm-hmm. Can I back it up? Can I prove it? And I was literally, all I got to do is just push a button and just delete that one slide. Won't change much in the overall talk. And I was going to say, well, before I'll go on, and I'm going to go on this afternoon, and this guy comes up to me and said, Mike, I'm looking forward to your talk. I don't know much about your research, but I saw an owl and a UFO together. Oh, and I had a spiritual awakening. This happened simultaneously with me saying, I got to delete this slide. A guy comes up to me and says, introduces himself, owl, UFO, spiritual awakening. I'm like, okay, it gave me I'm at the point now where I trust that exactly, that kind of synchronistic confirmation from the universe to no, okay. And then I just trusted it, and I've gotten so good at that, maybe to a fault, but I've gotten really good at that. And so woven within it, spiritual awakening blends with spirit, I don't know, that's a loaded term because it's a little fuzzy. It can mean a lot of things, but I know what they're implying. And so there is a spiritual aspect that you would never know if you watched the UFO Congress stuff where the guys are talking in front of, committees and stuff like that, and they've got their military rank anyway, you would never know that there's this aspect to it. And here, I'm almost done here. When I talk to people, the pop culture thing about the UFO thing, right, is that, beings show up in your bedroom, and then they take you out of bed, and they take you aboard a flying saucer, and they do creepy medical exams on you, or they take you out of your car on a lonely road, and you're completely overwhelmed with terror, and it's this creepy monster movie story. I talk to people all the time. I have heard that account or something of that flavor. Zero would be incorrect, but wow, it is such a small, I'm going to say less than 1% of the time I talk with people. Yeah. Has anything to do with that. What it is, it's all of this stuff about, I had the weirdest coincidence. My life feels orchestrated. I met this woman. I've been married for 10 years. Here's how we met. It's beyond strange. Like those are the stories I'm hearing. And that's what is being ignored by the mainstream research community. So there.
Well, you've explained very well. Pretty much the reason why I wanted to contact you, because again, as we were saying before the show, I'm not really into I'm interested in I've been interested for years. Actually, I learned of you through Richard Dolan. Well, not personally, but
Oh, he's been great. He's been great for me. Yeah, Rich was a huge promoter. My book would not have been as popular if it wasn't Richard Dolan tooting my horn for me, because I'm from Michigan. I'm too polite to do that myself, so he did it for me. Yeah.
I mean, he's been a very important person through his work in my life too, and the UFO subject. I've always been kind of moving along in parallel from it, because I never really had a UFO experience. I've had once. I've had one. I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. Can't remember exactly, but to prove my point, I can't remember exactly. It was the most boring. Like, if that was a UFO experience, it was really boring. And
what was it?
Oh, okay. Well, I've never really. Well, I can tell that
I listen to these stories all the time. Yeah, I'm curious now. So,
okay, so, so I used to do pottery, and I was alone in the pottery studio. It was a really big studio that I shared with some people, and there was a very, very, very large window on one side of the building, and it's I can't believe I'm telling that story. It almost sounds dumb to me, but so yeah, as I told you, I'm living in Montreal, and I'm pretty much not downtown, but a bit more up north. But it's close to the mountain. There's a big, kind of big mountain. It's actually pretty small, I think.
Does it have a cross
Montreal.
on top?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's Mount Royal, and so the studio had a view of Mount Royal, but it's pretty far. I live close to the mountain, but the studio itself, like, it was pretty small, but we could see it very clearly. So one night I finish doing my pottery stuff, and I'm just putting my clothes on because it was winter, so I was on my bike, not at the moment, but I was using my bike to go back home in the snow. So a lot of layers, And while I'm putting them on, at one point, I see just the classic orange orb, just there, and it's pretty big, and I see it's not super close to the building, but it's very hard to tell how far it was exactly, but and I stood there, and I'm like I'm into the UFO stuff. I'm very critical also. So the first thing I think it is, what else could it be? It's probably not a UFO. So what else could it be? So I'm thinking, maybe light reflections in the window. And so I look, I open the window and I look, and I'm like, no, okay, it's there. It's not a reflection. And it just stays there. I'm telling you, it's really boring. So I look at it after I figured, it seems true. I'm just going to look at it. And because for me, it's always the movement. When people describe crazy, maneuvers, I'm like, oh, that could be it. There was none of that. It was just right there, floating there, just completely still, actually. Not even flowing.
Completely still. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, really, really, yeah, still. So I'm like, okay, well, and I even thought even if I film this, it's going to look like it's not gonna be looking. I kind of regret not filming it, at least for myself, but for sure it's not gonna be convincing to anyone because it's gonna look like a little stupid dot in in the video.
The problems with cell phones, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I look at it for about a minute, which seemed like a long time, especially in just staring at a dot. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put on my another layer of clothes, and I thought like it's gonna be gone when I, emerge from my sweater, but it was still there, but it was much further away. It was, I saw it over the mountain, so it was tiny. But just in the time that I put on my sweater, like it didn't make any sense. Like nothing travels that fast because I kind of did it kind of quickly, like I wanted to still see it, So, and same thing, like I just stared at it for about a minute and it didn't move. And, I was like, okay, well, if it was a reflection, like what moved while I was like, it didn't make sense. So, and then I just left. Actually, so I wonder if I'm the first person who just saw a UFO and just thought, well, okay, that's it, bye.
Oh, very, very common. What you're describing is very common. Two people could be sitting together. One person gets all amped up. One person totally ignores it. The third person doesn't see it at all. They're like, I don't even see what you're talking about. So the human reaction is all over the place. So
okay.
And well, so here's a question. Oh, go on. Is there more? No, go.
No. I just left and I was like, what was that?
Yeah.
Maybe that was my UFO stories. I don't know. I have one in my mind that when I was a kid, I think I've seen a UFO, and I actually see it in my mind, but it doesn't make sense. Like I was lying on the grass in front of the house, and it was dark and it was summer, but in Montreal, I was on the south shore of Montreal back then. At 8:00, like it's not dark outside in the summer. The sun comes down at like 10,
Mm-hmm.
So I at the age that I was about, I don't know, 7 or 8. I was in bed by 10, So it doesn't make any sense. So there you go. But I have much weirder stories, but those are my UFO stories, which are
okay. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not locked into the UFO thing at all these days. But I was in this would have been around 2017, I bet 16, 17. I was in Montreal. I was speaking at a UFO conference that was at the college campus downtown.
McGill.
Not McGill. It wasn't McGill. It was the state school, Montreal, or Quebec College or something. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, but so we were in a hotel and it was right downtown. It felt like it was downtown. It was a big, tall hotel, and we had this great view of Mount Royal. So we had a view of Mount Royal. I was with my partner at the time, Andrea, came with me, and I was living in upstate New York, so it was an easy drive to get there. It was like less than 2 hours from where we were. We were right on the Canadian border in upstate New York, and we got back from the conference, and it was the last day, and we all went out for all the speakers, and there was a big crowded restaurant, and it was really great. And we got back to the hotel room, and it was kind of late, and it was been a long day, and I just kind of laid down in the bed and just went, whew. And then I heard Andrea Villiers, who's got a very French name. Mm-hmm. So she was looking out the window at Mount Royal and said, look. And then by the time I sat up, it was gone. But she watched pretty close to what you're describing. I'm pretty sure it was an orange orb hovering or moving through the sky, moving towards the peak, and then it just went click and pop, disappeared. So
really,
and she and I have had a lot of experiences that was and I gotta say, I was just like completely like yeah, like is it worth sitting up so I can see this? Like it was like I gotta sit up and so I can see a UFO, and I did, but by that time it was gone. And then there was a guy at the conference. He was not a speaker. His name is John. I have to look up his last name. He lives in Montreal. He's originally American, and but he has a powerful, amazing story. I think from the early 70s.
Oh, okay.
That he had on Mount Royal, and it doesn't play out like a UFO experience. It plays out like a contact experience with a guardian angel, or like a mythic being. It's really, and I can't remember the story off the top of my head, but I was riveted when he was telling me that. So I heard that story about Mount Royal, went back to the hotel room. He told me that at dinner time, went back to the hotel room, and then saw a UFO. Or my partner Andrea, who also heard the story, saw a UFO over Mount Royal after hearing a story about essentially a UFO experience on Mount Royal. So,
wow.
And now I talked to you, and that's 3 that I know of. So I'm sure there's more. So.
Well, there was a big one that's very well known over right downtown, and there was even articles in the journals and police report and stuff like that. I think it was in the early 90s or something. So yeah, apparently they come here too.
They come everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always like, you're in the middle of city, you're not gonna see UFOs. Actually, I'm not seeing owls either. If there was an owl in my window right there, I'd be as freaked out as I would be if I saw a UFO, if not more. Because it wouldn't make sense that there would be an owl here.
Well, there's certainly owls there. If there's certainly owls. Owls can be in urban areas. They eat rodents, and they're just like hawks, and they just hunt at night. So you tend not to see them. So, but so yeah, what you're telling me is that's so. You've had a lot of powerful, highly charged experiences in your life.
Yes, and you said that word that I only. That expression, highly charged human experience. I've only noticed today that you used that expression. I've been using the term mysticism because I didn't really know. And actually, starting from what it said in the French dictionary, that basically or mystics. A mystic is someone who puts importance and lives in accordance to a connection with God, however you want to put, So I'm like, yeah, that's pretty broad, and that's a satisfying term, So if that's it, well, I'm a mystic, for sure. I don't. But because I think it has. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here a bit, but it has this connection with either the occult or, esoterica or, and I think it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with that. A square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square, So a mystic is not necessarily an occultist, but sometimes occultists are mystics also, and so on, But the highly charged human experience is, for me, defines very well, the kind of life I've been living, and the kind of life that I guess more and more people nowadays are going to be experiencing, So go ahead.
Oh, I think that people have always been experiencing this, though we have had just out of sheer politeness or societal norms, we have been told to shut that off. So, and honestly, I think it's YouTube. I think it's the internet. I think it's the way we communicate. I think once one person tells a mystical story or a paranormal story around the dinner table, then the other person said, well, he told his story, I can tell my story. And I think that has collectively been happening to society, and it seems to have its energy all its own, where by talking about it, by being open to it, it invites a little more in. So I don't want to, like, I could look at this any number of ways, but I certainly feel like society's changed in the last 20 years. And it's accelerating, it feels like. And so that's something I've certainly recognized. What I've also recognized is, like, people who come forward with their UFO experiences. And UFO experience, you turn the clock back 20 years. If you said you saw a UFO, that was how comedians would say, this person's crazy. He believes in UFOs. That's crazy. Yeah. So if you had said you had a UFO experience, you would essentially be calling yourself crazy to the majority, or let's say a goodly percentage of the people. That has changed, where I think you can get away with telling these stories. And I know just what it means to be too forceful in my, like, I was a little forceful in the way I approached this stuff. Or let's say, what's the right word? I was not at peace with the experiences at a certain chapter between about 2006 to 2013. And the way I described the events came out, I was a little bit of a zealot, and I'm still a zealot, but I'm much more calm about it these days. So
that's that's why I wanted to reach out to you, because also this you've described. Maybe that's what you meant by that time span that you mentioned, like almost like kind of wondering if you're crazy, or maybe you even were a bit crazy. And I'm not saying that in any kind of disparaging way, because I've been through that, and I don't know if I'll ever go through that again. I don't think so, like, because I feel more grounded and more I have a bit more, not control. Control seems very harsh of a word, but more control over my life, and also, like those crazy experiences. They break the mold, so for sure, like when they happen, and whatever shape it takes, I think, whatever, if it's a UFO experience, or for me it was more in dreams and meditation experiences, and wild synchronicities, you kind of see the floor just crumble under your feet, and you're like, okay, what is real, And so, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, and I have a purring cat.
Oh, I know. I saw the cat. The cat is dark in your dark room. I saw the big tail there. I see its head. So so it's funny. I have this microphone with a little fuzzy, I call it a Russian hat, but everyone, when I do it just like this, they're like, "Oh, what's your cat's name?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's my microphone." So,
this little guy is really he's really affectionate, and but usually it lasts for about 3 to 4 minutes, and then I let him go, and we're done. So
okay, I live in a house with a bunch of cats, and they're not that affectionate to me, so they're super nice. But anyway, so yes, we are. Here, let me tell the story that you may have heard me tell this story on other podcasts, but there's a couple stories that I like telling because they're quick to tell, and then they tell a lot about the issues. So this doesn't have any UFOs in it. The guy, he's got an apple orchard out his backyard. So his family runs an orchard, and he goes back to the back of the orchard to meditate. It's right up against it's in the northeast. He gets right up against the forest. So he's meditating in the forest, and as his eyes are closed, he's meditating. From the forest, he hears this screeching noise, this awful, terrible noise, this awful noise of like screeching and this harsh cries, and it scares him. He said it made the hair on the back of his neck go up. And he said, I got to get out of here. But he said, no, I have to face this. He was scared, but he said, I have to face this. So he went into the forest, And he found it very quickly. There was an owl on a branch, and the owl was looking right at him. And it was a barred owl, very common. It's one of the bigger owls on the East Coast. And they have a really loud, booming voice. So this thing is squawk, squawk, squawk. It's like screeching, screeching, screeching right at him. It's like it's looking right at him. He's looking right at it, and he said like it felt like it was angry at me. And then the owl flew off, and he went back to his family. So he goes to his family, and it's dinner time, and his wife. He says, honey, like I saw this owl in the woods, and I was meditating. I saw this owl, and it was screeching. It was looking right at me, and I think it was angry at me. It was like chewing me out. That's what he said. It was chewing me out. And then the owl was gone, and she was like, oh, that's nice, honey. Set the table. She doesn't get it. She doesn't understand how powerful it was. So he tells his kids, like, oh, I saw this owl, and it was screeching, and they were like, Dad. So they didn't get it either. So after dinner, he gets his camera, and he walks into the woods, and he says aloud, he said, my family doesn't believe me. I need a picture. And this owl comes in, lands on a branch, he gets a picture, and the owl flies off. And I asked, what were you meditating on? What was your meditation? What was your intention? He said, oh, I was meditating on if there was a God. Now, it's funny because I wish I could look this up. I should have this ready to go because what he said was much more poetic than is there a God? But he was, and I've since been in communication with him. He's been going through he's doing shamanic work these days. He's got a shamanic practice. So, which does not surprise me. And so there's a story that plays out like a dream. Here, I'll tell you one more. This is a very similar story. They almost bookend a little bit, these two stories. No UFO in this story either. Young Native American or First Nation member, and he is in part of the Huron tribe, and they have a reservation. It's a very small reservation. I grew up in Michigan, which is shaped like this. Might be like this for you. But it was like right here. It was like this little spot where it doesn't look like much on the map. It's like a little rectangle. And I didn't know. I grew up in Michigan and didn't know it was there. So he says, I was living on the Huron reservation, and there was and I had a kite. I was a 12-year-old boy. I had a kite, and I was flying this kite. I love this kite. And the ball of string, I was holding the ball of string, and the kite get pulled by a strong wind, and the string got pulled out of my hand, and the whole kite and the string flew off and went out of the meadow, out into the forest. So he got his friend. He said, I love that kite. I want to find that kite. So they went and walked through the forest, and then they saw the kite in the top of a tree. And they walked to the base of the tree, and at the base of the tree was an owl that was all wrapped up in the string.
Yeah.
And it would have died.
Wild.
So they get an adult, and they cut the owl free. And if I remember correctly, the owl was injured, and they nursed it back to health, and the owl was released.
Wow.
And I heard this story, and I said, were you a shaman? Are you a shaman? And he says, in a word, yes. Now, the reason I asked that question, are you a shaman, should tell you the kinds of stories I'm getting. Right? And that story, if you were a Jungian analyst, and your client came in, and they laid on the couch, or whatever, they sat in the chair, laid on the couch, and you were taking notes, and you were having your conversation, you're going through Jungian analysis, and a person said, here's my dream, here's last night's dream. I was flying a kite, and the kite got pulled out of my hand, and the string, and the kite went into the forest, and it captured an owl. Like, wow. Like, that's dream language. Wow, there's plenty there to, like, talk about in a dream. Didn't happen in a dream, happened in a person's real life. And I, without skipping a beat, said, this guy's a shaman. This is the kind of thing shamans tell. This is the shaman story. So no UFOs in either of those accounts, and those are actually what I call like very subtle stories. I said this earlier. People contact me and they said, I had this owl experience. Like, I don't know who to tell. I don't know what to make of it. And they tell me the story. And I say, I have not heard that story, but I have heard so many with the flavor and mood of that story. Exactly. So the same tone, the same tenor, the same flavor. And I'm sure someone like researching fairies in Ireland would know that flavor of a story. Like, oh, I haven't heard that fairy story exactly, but I've heard many with that flavor and mood. So and so there's something palpable that I can recognize. People say, do you think you're tricked? Do you think people trick you? So I thought about it. And I guess they could. I mean, all they do, I'm just, a lot of it is just reading emails and like going back and forth with people, but sure, I could be tricked. And then I thought to myself, there was a guy in my book, The Messengers. His name is Joe. And we corresponded for a while, and he had kind of a funny email. Like, I think he created this email just to reach me. And then there came a day I tried to get a hold of him, and his email didn't work anymore. That's the only way we had communicated. His story was already in the book. Like, I told his story, couldn't get a hold of him. No way to get a hold of him. So the person said, hey, do you think you're tricked? I said, I could be. And then I had the thought, that guy Joe, he could have tricked me. It was in my head, a thought. I never spoke it out loud, never talked about it on a podcast, had this thought in my head. A day later is probably incorrect, but within a few days, this guy Joe gets back to me and said, hey, this is Joe from your book. I just really want to say, I am so grateful you put my story in the book. It's really an honor. It really means a lot to me. So that's same as the spiritual awakening thing.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm guessing you know just what I'm talking about.
Oh, clearly.
Okay, I'm to have that kind of like, oh, like, what about that? And then whoop, it's confirmed instantly, sometimes simultaneously.
I mean, for me, this part, like this being tricked part, is not really an issue anymore because I'm constantly thinking if I'm trying to trick myself, anyways. You know. So and in the end, it doesn't. I don't know if you're gonna jive with this, but to me, it doesn't really matter, you know? Like, even if someone has the wildest UFO, owl, coyote story or whatever, but doesn't like grow from it in any way, or, you know, it's kind of entertainment in a way, and they just, you know, it doesn't, like, that's not what's important, you know? And sometimes, well, I know for me, like, synchronicity is a big thing, you know, like I've even earned a nickname from some friends because an old roommate who lived with me, and we worked together, so he knew a lot about my life, and he gave me a nickname that had to do with that, the fact that I'm always surrounded with crazy synchronicities. And after a while, for me, I realized it was kind of a language more than just someone or like an external entity or trying to tell you something, or life that wants to put you in the right way. What is right? You know, I sometimes say jokingly that I'm a recovering non-dualist. So, I have trouble with that right and wrong, you know, it's a very subtle thing. So what does that mean? Anyways, what I mean to say is that language has a distinct feel, and I'm guessing it relates to what you're recounting. And sometimes I have mind-blowing I'll say coincidences that I know that they're not that meaningful. They're just like crazy, and I'm used to those. So, and well, sometimes I have them and I know there's something behind it or whatever. But sometimes also it's kind of a slight thing, just a little thing, but I know it's meaningful, you know, even though like, and I'm going to tell anyone and they're going to say, why are you even thinking about that? You know, like it's not important. It doesn't mean anything, but I feel it, you know? So I guess, it actually takes me to a question I want to ask, because it's so funny. I've barely looked at my questions. But I don't want to steer too much away from the yeah, the crux of this highly charged human experience thing, you know. That's what I try to make this show about, you know. So understanding what's happening with all those crazy experiences, and like kind of studying in my own life what happens there, I see and you've mentioned that, like the relation between the language of dreams and the language of synchronicities, and all those, like, you know, like for you, well, you're known as the owl guy, but if I had to publish a book, I would be the rose guy, because I've had crazy stuff happen with the image of the rose, you know. So I don't know what you think about that, but it feels like the numinous, I'll say it like that, presents itself with the language that's already present in our psyche. It sounds almost too normal to say, but it's a very important thing to understand, I think.
I agree. And I spoke to a researcher. He wrote a book called Synchronicity. That's the title of the book, Synchronicity. His name is Dr. Kirby Surprise. And I contacted him when I was working on the first book. I was having all kinds of synchronicities because I was reading his book. And so Dr. Surprise is a clinician. He's a psychologist, I think. I can't remember his actual title. And I basically reached out to him, and this was actually in that chapter, like where I was like, kind of pretty highly charged and kind of going a little crazy. And I'm like, I am researching UFOs and owls, and I'm having so many UFO and owl synchronicities. It's making me crazy. And he said, you are putting a lot of energy into, I think he's the one who said highly charged. I think I stole that line from him. You're putting a lot of energy into these highly charged archetypes. The owl is a powerful mythic animal. The UFO is a powerfully, heavily laden pop culture symbol. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're putting that energy into those, the universe is reflecting that back. He said something that I love. He said, we are all just parakeets in the cage, pecking at the mirror, not realizing it's our own reflection. So I am generating exactly the synchronicities that are going to serve me. And what I have found is, and this is a loose pattern. Like when I was all frantic, I was getting frantic synchronicities. Like the synchronicities were so overwhelming. They were a little too much. They were crazy making. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, I had an experience that was just like, oh, this is real. Like I was doubting. I was full of doubts. I was like, this can't be real. Can't be happening. It's too much. Society, science. My junior high school, science teacher would say, this cannot happen. But it was happening. And there came a point when I just gave up and said, yes, it's happening. Mm-hmm. And after that, I was still having just as many synchronicities, but they presented themselves in a calmer way. So it's very common doing this kind of work where I will meet people and I can see they're all amped up. Oh my God, I'm having these experiences. I don't know what to do. I'm going crazy. Like my wife, can't talk to my wife about it. I feel like every time I go out the door, I talked to a guy, well, it was a great guy, super nice guy. And he was having all these owl experiences, and he got to a job and he was doing like pest control work where they would hornets' nests and termites and things like that. Mm-hmm. And someone said, hey, can you come get this owl? Like we have an owl that won't leave our porch. And he's like, okay. So he took this owl, put it in a cage, and had an owl at his house. So he had an owl at his house, and he'd go talk to this owl. And eventually the owl got better, and it was injured somehow, or it seemed to be sick, and it eventually got better, and he released it. But like he was having all these owl experiences. He gets called to, he had his own owl for a while. Like there are not many people who can say that. So, that somehow the universe is reflecting back. And I love that quote. Like we are all just parakeets in the cage, pecking at the mirror, not realizing it's our own reflection. So we're like, oh, it's this UFO owl thing. Tick, 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 it's this thing, and then you get it right back.
Yep, makes sense. I mean, I don't know how big you are on astrology, but like for me, like I'm interested. I don't know that much about it, but I've had very mind-blowing, very reality-shaking experiences with just having my natal chart done, you know? So I've been researching is a big word, but well, I've been researching in my own life. Why is it that this person who doesn't know me basically like can tell what my life has been in such intricate details, like this, like just by, you know, so by kind of meditating on that, like it feels like we're all built on different sets of archetypes or principles. Like I don't know exactly how to put it, because the term archetype is, like, I'm gonna get emails from angry Jungians if I use it.
Oh, I love it. Go. Bring it on.
But so that mirror is not going to project the same thing for everyone, for sure, you know. So yeah, it's I don't know exactly how to put it, because I think this kind of experience, like, not only can bring out the reality, eventually the reality of this mirror-like reality, but also make you aware of what is not the mirror. And so like the infinite and the nothingness and the great void. And that's when you get into that, I think that's that can drive someone crazy, pretty much.
I'm looking up at you mentioned the archetype, and there's a quote here. It's in my book. I got the book right on the table. I'm going to look this up here. There was a woman named Jacqueline Smith who wrote a book about animal channeling. She would channel the spirits of animals, and one of them was an owl, and it was a really interesting thing. It was actually really complicated. Some, like the dog and the butterfly, would tell these really simple stories. Oh my gosh, the owl was like giving her this like cosmic message that I couldn't follow. It was, so we are from the dimension beyond the 8th dimension, and it was like so. But she also said something. I got to look this up here. There's a little quote she said about archetypes. Okay, so I'm glad there's a handful of people when I was doing the research that I recorded, and I'm so glad I did. So I was talking to Jacqueline because I wanted to hear her story about channeling the owl. So I reached out to her and said, can we talk? And she got back to me, and we were talking on the phone. And then I said, what are you working on these days? And she said, I'm working on my memoir. And it's like, oh, what's your memoir about? And she said, oh, my UFO experiences. I didn't know that at all. It didn't surprise me. And then we're talking, and we're going back and forth, and she's got this really lovely presence about her. And I say, hey, like the next time you see that owl, you ask for me. Like, what's up with the UFOs? Mm-hmm. And we talk for a little bit, and then she starts talking in this really halting way. Like kind of her voice changes completely. And she even says, under her breath, you can hear her say, words. Like she's struggling, like, oh, words don't even work. And she said, so I look at it in this sense. She's talking about the owl, and I'm reading right from my book. So I look at it in this sense. They are using the owl symbolically, but the owl is still the owl frequency to mirror us in an archetypal sense, because humans think of owls in a certain way, right? There is an archetypal image that is mirrored to the humans, that goes in on a subconscious level and connects with the human's genetic memory bank. Because humans think with symbols. They are touching us on that level. And it goes back to the beginning of humankind and how we see owls. Not only here, but in the soul connections in other star systems. And I was like, were you channeling? And she said, yeah. So that little definition, right? So it goes into a subconscious level, goes right back to the origins of humanity. That's as good a definition of archetype as it can get. And so I do this thing where I ask people, how would you define an archetype? Everyone's got a different definition. So no one has the same. Archetype in the dictionary means like quintessential or like a standard, right? So if you like, it's an archetypal cowboy movie. It means it's like the standard cowboy movie. So it has a lot of meanings. But in that case, when she said that, I had been in that kind of crazy making mess of trying to make sense of the experiences in my life. And and especially with the owl research that I was doing, like it was like the puzzle was a mess, right? So the jigsaw puzzle, all the pieces were on the table. I couldn't make sense of it. When she said owls are an archetype, it was like the whole puzzle went whoosh, click, and all clicked together. And I could see it. It's like, oh, I see it. The owls are an archetype. Let's make that like everything got cleaner in the way I could frame it in my own mind. I don't know whether it made it true, but for me, I had a way in to try to confront this mystery of the owl. Yeah. And the owl is an archetype. The owl is something we all understand within us at a subconscious level. As I said before, people call me up or write me letters and say, hey, I saw this owl on the fence. It's really beautiful. Wow, was it powerful? And they speak about it in this kind of, with this majesty that you don't get with any other animal or many animals. You know, like they were saying, it was an honor to have this owl on my fence post in the backyard. I mean, you don't say that about a robin or a bunny rabbit or something like that, but you sure say it about an owl. And that is very consistent in the letters I get. So my sense is that, they're tapping into the archetypal energy of a bird. That, I mean, it's just a bird, but they're tapping into that archetypal energy that all of us have somewhere within us. So that's my sense of it.
Love it. That said, I have a doozy for you.
Great.
Because you've said they a lot in that last little section there. That they, like they are using the.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because my 3 first interviews. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, the cat.
It's the first time the cat, like, you don't see it, but he's like he really wants to come on my lap right now.
Oh, let him up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's gone now, but maybe it's because I'm alone at home now. Anyways, I'm sorry about that. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the doozy.
Oh, them.
Yeah, exactly. So okay. In 3 of my first interviews, I've the second interview was with Ian Duncan, who's a Taoist priest, but who's this something maybe people don't know that much about Taoism, but there's in a certain way, there's a lot of shamanic work in Taoism, and Taoist magic is a thing, and even channeling, actually. So channeling of ascended masters or immortals, I guess. They would. I'm not a Taoist, so I'm sorry if I'm not using the right words. So an experience of them or the other, and then the 2 subsequent interviews were with magicians, so a ceremonial magician, and especially one, Douglas Batchelor, who has the very well-known podcast, very popular podcast about magic called Magic. What Magic Is This? And he told me about like he's doing what is it? Oh, is it Enochian? Enochian. Anyways, it's basically it's invoking demons. So it doesn't sound like a very good idea, but when you get to know a bit more about it, it's like, oh, okay, it doesn't have to do with evil or anything like that, and it's just a more complex thing. But anyways, what I mean to say by that is I've been very curious about how does the other words
Yeah, it's rough.
how does the other feel when it comes to will and free will, That's a biggie. So because like I have my experience of the other, it doesn't have to do with UFOs, but maybe I'll tell my experience some other time or after the show if you want to. But so it's hard for me to know if the other as really like the same kind of free will, bear with me, that we have. And a way that I put it in one question that I asked the other magician, Denis Poisson, has a great channel called Foolish Fish. I asked him, do the gods change their minds, Because it feels like they're incarnated images of these archetypes, and they don't change. Like they're the expression of a very specific kind of energy. And they can't change, like blue doesn't become red just because it's tired of being blue, So I don't know what you think about that. Like your experience of the other, like, well, I guess maybe I kind of know what you're going to say, maybe not. Because you seem to have an experience of the other that's external to you and your own consciousness in a way, which is something that I kind of can say, but most of my experiences, like I can't really say that it's not kind of me, like me generating this stuff. It doesn't feel like it, but aside from one or two experiences, like mostly I'm like, it could be me, Oh, that's so. Maybe that's
So
like a complex way of putting something very simple. But any thoughts about that?
So free will.
Yep.
And then you said them. Okay?
Oh, just to finish.
Them and free. Yeah. Oh, go on.
I'm sorry. It's really quick, because the three times the same question arose. It was like, well, how do you know you have free will? So it got very, very deep very quickly. And so sorry, that was it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. Well, this is one collected thing. So I did a hypnosis session to look at one night, an event that happened in 2013. So 5 years later, in 2018, I went to look to a hypnotherapist she does normal hypnotherapy stuff for like, quitting smoking and relieving tension and stuff like that. But she also does UFO hypnotherapy stuff. And this is right out of the thing where everyone says, that's trouble. Don't do that. There's a lot of people in the UFO field who don't trust the hypnotherapists or don't trust the information that comes out from the hypnotherapist. I'm like I feel like I've exhausted, I feel like I really worked hard to go through my own self-exploration. And I was at the point where I'm going to do this. The night of March 10th, 2013 was the event. Remember I said earlier, I had this thing where I was like, oh, this is real. And everything got calmer after that. So it wasn't so much that things got calmer, but the little voice in my head that said, this can't happen. This can't be real. This can't be true. That voice got shut off. Still had problems, still had a lot of work to do, still researching this stuff, but it was much easier without that ever-present doubt whether it was real. Then I knew it was real after March 10th, 2013. I was sleeping outside under the stars in southern Utah. So I went to talk to Yvonne Smith, who's in California. Now, I call her up on the phone months ahead of time and say, I'm gonna be in California. She's in Pasadena, California. And I said, while I'm there, I would love to do a hypnosis therapy if it's possible. And she said, she answers, she says, Mike, what a nice surprise. You contacted me. I started your book, The Messengers, this morning. And I called her that same morning. So this is the stuff that just is ever present in my life. Now, I go to see her. The night of March 10th, 2013 is this lovely night where I'm sleeping under the stars. I feel like something happened that night. Lots of little anecdotal things connected to that night. I have clear memories of things, but I got a really strong feeling something happened that night. So, before the session, right? So this is a book, my first owl book. This is my first owl book. The first owl book had already been written. She had it on her desk. I was already the owl guy. All I did was full-time job, get up in the morning, answer owl emails, write owl books, talk on podcasts. I'm the owl guy. So I say, when I'm in this hypnotic state, this vulnerable place, you ask me what's up with the owls. She's like, great, no problem. So we go through this thing. I won't go through the whole thing. You can hear it other places. I've talked about it at length. I did an audio book for my third book called Hidden Experience. I tell that story very clearly in that. And so it's my own voice. And I had to act basically and speak my own hypnosis session. So this thing happens. I freak out. I'm crying. I'm swearing. I'm like swearing at the universe, and swearing at them basically. So in the thing, so I'm like, all of a sudden I'm on board a flying saucer and I'm like walking in this hallway. Now, I don't think this really happened. It may have. It doesn't feel like it really happened. It feels like a dream. When I talk about it, I say, oh, this dream that I had. And I was like, oh, that wasn't a dream. That was a hypnosis session. So I call it a dream. You can learn lessons from dreams. You can learn a lesson from this hypnosis experience, even if it's not real. So I'm on board this craft. All of a sudden I'm it feels like I'm on trial, but it was like a really tacky conference room with ugly carpeting and plastic folding tables and fluorescent light. And it's like, I love it. I'll tell you right now, there is no ugly brown beige carpeting on board a flying saucer. That was something else. That was like a theatrical thing in my mind. So I'm standing there in front of this table, and there's about 8 of these beings at the table. I can't quite see them, but they're kind of fuzzed out, but I sure get the sense that they're the gray aliens with the big bald heads and the big black eyes. And I'm saying, why am I here? And they're saying, you volunteered for this. I'm like, what does that mean? And they go, now is the time. And I got so mad. I got so mad at them. Oh, I got so mad at them. And I told this story to a shaman. And he was like, man, hey, whoa, you lost me at the aliens at the folding table. And then he said, but if you had said there were 8 crows at the folding table, I'd be right there with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the difference, right? They're both archetypes. The crow's an archetype. The aliens are an archetype. What if they were 8 leprechauns? Or what if they were 8 ascended masters or 8 glowing balls of light or a pantheon of Catholic saints or
it's the mirror.
I feel like I'm not completely free, but I'm right there with you. You don't have to sell me on the raven thing or the crow thing. I'm right there with you. And I said, okay, what would you call them? What's a simpler way to call them? And he said, oh, your guides. Great. Okay, the guides. Okay. So when all this stuff goes on, and I swear and I cry and I'm purging. Oh my God, I'm purging all these emotions. And I felt great afterwards. So it was like, and then at the end, the thing is kind of winding down, and Yvonne says, and Mike, what is your connection to owls? And I don't skip a beat. I just say, the owls aren't important. That comes out of my mouth. I would never say that. right? The owls are the most important thing. The owls, like I get up in the morning, it's owls, owls, owls all day long. And that's my focus. That's everything. I'm like struggling with the mystery of the owls. I say, she asks, what's your relationship with owls? I say, the owls aren't important. And what I'm going to say next just flowed out of me in a way that did not sound like the rest of the hypnosis session, right? Hypnosis, you kind of whisper, and there's these long pauses. And I didn't have any of that. I just said, the owls aren't important. I am an artist, and I understand how people take in a symbol. The owl is a symbol on a door. The owl is not important, but it is the correct symbol for the door. We are on this side of the door in a tight, claustrophobic hallway. And on the other side of the door is an infinite vastness. And I was just like, where did that come from? I will also add that you can't see it here, but this is the door. This is my bedroom here. This is the door to the right there. That you can't see it at all, but that door, I'd been living here about a year. And I was looking at that door and I was like, I got a picture of it in my blog. You can Google it if you want. But there is 2 classic gray aliens with the big eyes in the grain of the wood. Mm-hmm. Rising out of them, above them, are 2 great horned owls, like ghostly images rising out of the symbol on a door. Like it's my door.
Yeah, okay.
It's right there.
It's really
right
weird.
There.
I heard this story, I saw the picture, but I never I didn't connect the two.
I didn't connect it either. It was
wow.
like, it took me, it was like, so let's go back up. Let's go way back. Free will. I had the experience. So Yvonne Smith says, why, Mike, why are you so emotional? And I'm like, scream, they want me to play some role. I scream it out like, I'm just like, it's rough to listen to that audio. Like, it's like, I'm coming unhinged and I scream, they want me to play some role. And then, now, let's go back to March 10th, 2013. That's the night I slept out under the stars. If it's true, like I saw a big round building on a hill. And I said, I was like sleeping out under the stars, pretty night. And I said, that building looks just like a flying saucer, a landed flying saucer. And I'm like, it can't be, it's gotta be a big building. And I rolled over and went back to sleep. No sense of anything. And I woke up and there was a coyote near my head, right? That's an archetypal animal, howling away. I was in a part of the country. The landscape is imbued with the folklore of the locals there, the natives there, and that would be the trickster, right? So the coyote is a trickster in their lore. And then I wake up later and there's a bright light behind a bush. Okay, there's another archetype, the glowing bush, right? That's totally a right out of the Bible. So, and then I have this weird experience of being on board a craft. Now, that was March 10th, 2013. In about March, it would be great if it was the next day. It's actually the day after. So less than 48 hours later, boom, I have my confirmation event. I'm like, oh my word, this is real. It's real. Whoosh, my life gets easier. I didn't realize it until like pretty recently. I started the book, The Messengers. I started writing the book 2 days after the event under the stars. So if I was on board that craft and Yvonne's hypnotherapy session is presenting accurate information, which I don't think it is necessarily, she asked, what do they want? And I screamed, they want me to play some role. 48 hours later, I started writing the book that has come to define my life. This big fat book about owls and UFOs. Now, so the implication is they told me to write that book, or they commanded me. They zapped me with their UFO ray gun or whatever it might have been. And then I was like forced to write that book, whether I wanted to or not. And I started writing it. It was hard work to write it. And I say in the book, I say it so clearly multiple times in the book. I say, I am writing this. Here's what I say. I say, it feels like, I can't know what's for certain. I say, it feels like this book like I am writing this book, the information for this book is coming from an outside source. Like my motivation to write this book is coming from an outside source. That's how it feels. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. So I'm saying that these whole set of events that happened, I couldn't put it together till like 7 or 8 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Probably less, probably 5 or 6 years later, more like 6 or 7 years later. I couldn't put all these little, like, wait a minute, you put that on the calendar, like this, like this, like this. I had the experience, I write the book, and like, it was like, so do I have free will? The implication is, in that story, is that this thing emerged. It's a mess to go into the whole thing, but that I existed on another planet. I don't think this is true. I mean, I look just like my dad, right? I'm me.
Yeah.
But I existed on some other planet in some other identity. Some identity was manifested within me when I incarnated in this person, me. Mm-hmm. And I, right from the beginning, they told me, or I volunteered in that other realm, whatever I am, if I'm a gray alien, I'm a glowing ball of light, I volunteered, I'm going to go to Earth and be Mike Clelland, and I'm going to play a role. Mm-hmm. And then this stuff starts happening. Yes, do I have free will? I like to think I do. At the same time, I'm like there's a million things I could be doing. Let me tell you, I would drive a much nicer car if I did anything else except wrote owl books. So, but yeah, I'll leave it at that. So,
I mean, I'm just basically, it's about that show. For me, it's about collecting those experiences, like, I'm more interested in what you just told us than, just reading some, I don't know, metaphysical theories, or because it's lived. And to me, I can't remember if it was before the show or during, but that notion of, is it real, it's kind of secondary, because it has an impact whether it has it has a physical reality or not, and where did I want to go with that? Because there's 10 million things that I could say.
Oh,
right
it's that door, right? So
yeah.
If people say, like, if at the end of the day, like, what am I trying to do? Right? So I don't want to try to prove anything. I'm not trying to say, like, oh, I'm right and you're wrong. I'm not saying I have these answers. I don't have any answers. I'm not a mystic. I don't have any answers. So, but I can say that that what I want to, like, when I talk on a stage, like I give these presentations, like I'm pretty good at it. I figure it all out, and I was a teacher for a while, so I'm really good at, like, I'm going to make my point this way, so I don't care if anyone believes my experience. Mm-hmm. I'll tell some stories. Not some stories are my own, some stories are other people's. But what I want at the end of the day, what I want is that the people who read my book, I don't care if they ever see an owl, I don't care if they believe in UFOs or fairies or space angels or guardian angels or whatever you want to call them, guides. What I want them to be open to is that there is a deeper, richer reality that is playing out parallel to our reality. It's intertwined with our reality somehow. How? It's influencing us. Perhaps we can influence the reality, but it can certainly influence us.
Yeah.
So I want people to be aware of that playful interaction. Synchronicity, to me, feels like it's part of that overlap.
Yeah.
I think that, let's say, the UFO occupants live in that other realm, but so do the fairies, so does Bigfoot, so does our dreams.
Light beings.
Yeah. The light beings, the ravens, whatever. Yeah. So the raven spirit. Yeah. So my goal is to have people be aware of that. You can pray, you can light a candle. There's all the ways to sort of, to try to try to tap into that other realm, but I just want to make sure that people know that that other realm exists. I think my life has been much richer. Someone asked me one time, like, oh, since you've been doing this work, how's your life changed? That's a good question. I was at a conference, I had to think. And I said, I now live in a magical universe.
Yeah.
Which I didn't before this thing. Part of the process was about 6 or 7 years where I thought I was going crazy. Mm-hmm. But I now live in a magical universe. And we all do. We have to just be aware of it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I mean, sometimes when I think about that free will thing, recently I've been thinking, well, I think it's kind of a boring answer. We kind of have free will. You know, you can't change everything. You can change a little. Which seems like it seems too boring to be true, but and also I've been thinking, well, free will is not necessarily a given. As in, I think we inherently all have it, but some people don't know that they do, and they just live their lives very mechanically, you know. And not to be disparaging to anyone's experience of life, and it's not a black or white thing. I mean, we all have times when we're kind of on the autopilot, you know, and we get disconnected from this magic of this inherent magic of the universe, you know. But yeah, eventually, I think, maybe I have a quick story I can tell. It's
true.
It's weird because I actually, that will be the second story, and those are the two that I never thought I would tell anyone because they're not so important to me. But well, I guess they are in some ways. But anyways, so about that, is it real thing, you know? One day, I was still pretty new to the UFO subject, and I was interested in like pretty wild stuff, you know, like just curious of, you know, and again, not judging of anyone's belief, but I was starting to get out of the Pleiadians and the, you know, like I couldn't relate truly with that, but I was still watching like shows on Gaia and stuff like that. Gaia TV, for people who don't know what it is, go check it out. Again, no judgment. So I was watching this thing about, I can't remember what kind of beings it was, but they were blue. Okay, they had blue skin, and I remember painting myself when I was a kid, like always with blue skin for some reason. I love the color blue. Even you can't really tell, but even the walls back there are blue, and I'm wearing blue, and you know, I love blue. So I'm watching that show, and then the phone rings, and it's my mom, and she says, I have something very strange to tell you about. That's something that just happened. And my mom's a bit new agey and stuff, so I'm always like, oh yeah, what it is, you know, like what's she gonna tell me now, you know? It's kind of a joke between she and I. So she says, okay, I'm at the hairdresser, and she notices that I'm a bit worried. And she says, what's going on? And my mom says, I'm a bit worried about my son because, yeah, I've been, like, fortunately, knocking on wood, I've been dealing with depression much better in the last 5 years of my life, but it used to be a huge issue, you know? So, yeah, so she said, I'm a bit worried about my son. And then the hairdresser, who's apparently kind of a bit of a psychic, puts her hand on my mom's shoulder. And the way that my mom recounts the story, she says, I barely had the time to finish my sentence. And she said, it's your son's first experience on this planet, you know? And again, it's kind of like your craft, like being in the craft story. You don't know if you really were there, or, and so I don't know if that's true. But, and even at that time, like hearing a story like that, like I'd be skeptical, like right off the bat, because I had considered it, and I was slowly coming to the notion that I'm not sure if that makes much sense, or if it's usable information or whatever. So my reaction really surprised me when she said that, because I started to cry like instantly, because I thought, oh, it makes so much sense. You know, like how hard this life has been, you know, like, and first, like, wow. I mean, I'm living in Montreal, like in a nice neighborhood. I have those guitars and stuff like that. People have it much harder than me. Like, especially nowadays, we have very good examples of that. But like adjusting to this place, you know, and the lack, especially the lack of magic, like it's so drab in so many ways, and it's so hard to deal with, and it's like the tediousness of having to have a job and feed that body thing that we have, you know, like, but it all clicked like instantly, like, oh, it's my first time, I don't know, like, and I keep saying that, and it's funny because it's something I don't know if I said it in those words in the book, but for me, kind of the what's really, really helpful for anyone having those really wild experiences, or even just trying to deal with reality, you know, developing this ability to step outside oneself and kind of like controlled dissociation, you know, and just look at oneself as if it's not me. Like it's my avatar in the video game, you know, and just see what's going on there, you know, like that. And recently, and it's funny because it's I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little, but I'm almost done.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
In a podcast that I've been interviewed for my book, and it's on a podcast that just came out, and the way that I put it is becoming alien, you know, like stepping out and looking at my life, and even just the whole of human experience, and all the wars and all the beauty and all the beautiful and crazy and dumb thing that we do. Like, just look at it as if you're an alien. Like, what's going on there? And then know that you're going to get back in that vehicle and drive it around, you know, in that crazy world, you know? So I don't even know where I'm going with that. But, you know, I guess my point is that I don't know, and I don't particularly care if it's my first time on this planet and I'm truly a Pleiadian or whatever. I don't care about that stuff. But the way that I felt, you know, at that moment, that was big. That was big for me. I don't know if there's anything that people can take out of this experience, but I think even Jung, I'm going to say something, big asterisk there, so Jungians can correct me, but I think even Jung said one day about a woman who thought she was living on the moon, and someone else was speaking with Jung about that woman and said, yeah, that woman believes she lives on the moon. And Jung said, no, she's living on the moon, you know? And I don't think he meant it literally, but that's such a better frame to view our lives. through those symbols, I think we can understand ourselves much better if we consider those, that language of dreams and of synchronicities. And sorry, I went on a bit.
No, I understand. But if you've been listening to my talks, and I mean, I must have at some point said I've had a long history of clinical depression in my life. Yeah. So I'm very open with it. I talk about it in my books. I talk about it. It's right there. For instance, so I had an experience where I had a past life hypnotherapy session 10 years ago. 10 years ago this upcoming summer, it'll be 10 years. I met this woman at a conference. She was a speaker. I was speaking at a conference in England, and she was did past life hypnotherapy, went into past lives. And I told her about my life a little bit, and she's like, you don't need to go through UFO regression. You need to go through a past life regression. I'm like, great, I'm open to it. And so we went there. The stated goal was to better understand, or let's say alleviate, the depression. I was under for 2.5 hours, 3 hours. It's recorded. All kinds of stuff came up. But it was like this thing came up, and I don't believe it's true. Like true in quotes, right? Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Like I don't care. Like I leave it. So what the end of it is, I sat up in the chair. I was like, I'm cured. I am cured. And it's funny because I still, even now, it's like I'm in Seattle. It's gray here. Like you kind of go, like my mood can go down and it can kind of come back up, and I can kind of be late, kind of. But that's like that kind of gray mood isn't clinical depression. It's been cloudy for a bunch of days. Put me in a gray mood. That's not clinical depression. I know that. So I have been depression free for a decade. I had not been able to say that since I was 12. Now, the first time I remember being depressed was when I was 12 years old in middle school, and I also have what amounts to a missing time event. Bright light in the sky, missing time event when I was 12 years old. Like, did the aliens make me depressed? Like, I could ask that question. Like, it's right there. I can't quite parse out which came first, but I can say I had a missing time event. Did that make me clinically depressed? My mother's side of the family in Denmark, there's clinical depression on her side of the family. So I'm predisposed to it genetically, but gets up very murky. I had an experience. The worst I've ever felt, the darkest time was in the winter of 92, 93, January or February, right around there, of 1993. But it was the December of 1992 was, wow. Like, I'm amazed I'm still here. Like, it was bad. Like, wow, was it bad. And I'm suicidal. Is like, I was right there. I didn't do anything, but I was like right at that threshold. I had an experience where I wake up in the middle of the night and I look out the window and there's this bright light and there's these beings walking towards the house, like gray aliens walking towards the house. Like, this was like the worst. Like, I never trusted this memory because my mind was just so shattered at the time. Like, I confabulated this out of like just reading UFO books. I made it up, and I'm just my brain chemistry is a mess. So it makes sense that I could confabulate this dream. Didn't feel like a dream, felt like real event. Since then, so many synchronicities and weird things connect back to that night, but which to me is a form of people have called me on this, but for me, I take that seriously when the synchronicities are all knotted up with an event. Now, under hypnosis, I looked at this under hypnosis, almost nothing came up. It was exactly the same memory that I had consciously, except there was a feeling that was palpable. I just felt it. And I probably felt it in real life, but just couldn't articulate it. I looked out the window. There were 5 beings walking towards the house. They're backlit by a bright light. It would be great if the bright light was the size of a flying saucer. It was like small, like a washing machine size. And And I watched them for maybe 20 seconds. And then I heard a voice in my head say, "Oh, yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down." And I didn't wake up till the next morning. I dismissed it all as a dream, never went out to see if there were footprints in the snow. With a hypnotherapist for the past life, the story emerged. And it was interesting because I cried, I purged,
Really?
it felt great afterwards. Yeah, but she asked about that, she asked about what about the experience with the beings? And I said, what about the experience when you were 12 years old? No, excuse me, when I was 30.
Mm-hmm.
And why did they show up? And I said, to save me. And to save you from what? And I said, suicide. So that, you put it right there in the calendar of my life. That was when I had suicidal ideations. I was right there. And then to have those beings, whether they're gray aliens, could have been 5 ravens, could have been 5 glowing balls of light, could have been 5 Catholic saints, but those 5 beings were walking towards the house. And under hypnosis, my sense was those were my relatives. Like when I said, "Oh yes, they're here,"
Mm-hmm.
the way it felt was it was more like, "Oh yes, they're here again." Like my relatives were walking up the driveway. So this gets all mixed up. It would be incorrect. I cannot say with a straight face, "Oh, the aliens cured my depression," or saved me from suicide. I'm not going there.
Yeah.
But in the timeline of my life, I certainly take that seriously as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't give it too much credence because I'd only be guessing. I know what So did they arrive at that moment to play some role in my life to keep, and that's certainly what came out in the hypnotherapy session. That doesn't necessarily make it true. What I can say, I came out of that hypnotherapy session. I have not been depressed since.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, well, Mike, I kind of have to wrap up.
Oh, this has been great. This has been awesome.
But wait, I think because I don't want to finish on such a intense note. So, because you're kind of going towards a question that I actually had on my list. I asked none of them basically, but anyways. So, would you say that with all the stories and your personal experience, and with all the stories that you've had, and I'm guessing some people also told you their stories, you've known them now maybe for a while now. Some of them maybe you kept in contact, or I'm guessing. Would you say that generally, even though those crazy experiences drive us mad, would you say that generally it has a kind of a positive, have a hard time with that word, but kind of a positive effect on people?
I get asked this all the time. Yeah. So the question is are they good or bad? Right? Is the experience good or bad?
Well, more of the effect, like in very, okay, because when I look at, I'm gonna sound like a jerk, but like a UFO people, maybe I'm a UFO person myself. I don't know, because I like every day I get info on what's going on in the UFO world, so I'm probably a UFO person myself. But it feels like some of them, or I don't have an idea of how many, like what's the word I'm looking for? Moyen. like how many people. Sorry, I'm just gonna rewind and. So, looking at the whole of the people, like, would you say that generally they come out of it like more wise and more connected, or do a lot of them get stuck in this entertainment kind of mode, like where it's, oh yeah, man, they've seen like I've seen this crazy craft one night, and then I filmed it, but then it's you don't know, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people seem to get stuck on the surface of the appearance of and I think it's still there for something, you know, but I'm just curious as to, does it help, like does it help us grow? Am I wording that correctly?
So I'm not looking at the big picture, right? I'm not looking at the big totality. I'm looking at the little sliver that's connected with owls. That's the thread I'm pulling on.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the owl thing. So the people I'm interacting with, for the most part, I mean, this is oversimplification, but the energy I'm pouring into the subject is the owl stuff, and less so UFOs, more so highly charged human experience, of which a UFO sighting certainly qualifies. So those people, the easiest word I can use, like it's hard to like say, well, there's not one, but seeker would be the best. That's the one term that seems to work, that these people are seekers. We're all seekers all the time, every one of us in some way. But I may have so when I talk to people, I have a clipboard and I write down notes and stuff like that. And then when I talk to them I usually just write Reiki in the corner of the page before I talk to anyone. I don't take many notes, just like date, phone number, a couple key things. So if I ever have to refer back, but I write Reiki in the corner and I just wait. So the people who have UFO and owl experiences, I would argue that 50% of them, half the people, I've got thousands of people who have told me the stories. I would say half of them are Reiki healers. Think about that.
Yeah,
that's tell you
wild.
what, half the overall population is not Reiki healers. And if they're not Reiki healers, they're doing some sort of, they're doing something. They're doing sound baths, or they're doing energy work, or they're doing something. The very first Reiki session I ever did, I've been to other Reiki therapists. The very first one, I was living in this little town in Idaho. I went through this Reiki thing, and she like held her hands over me, and it was this, she just did it for a few minutes, and then I was like going there because of this. That was in the throes of that was a crazy chapter of my life. I was right in the middle of it. And she sat down across from me afterwards and said, "You are having a Kundalini awakening." Okay. And we talked for a while, and I said, "Hey, I got to ask a question. Have you ever had any odd experiences with owls?" I'm asking the Reiki therapist. And she says, "No, except for last night." and then I say, so I tell her, "Oh, I'm doing this owl research. It's making me crazy. It's this and that." And then she contacts me that night. And she said, "Oh, it happened again tonight." She was basically walking her dog, and an owl followed them while they were walking the dog. It was same dog, same road, different owl. One was a great horned owl. The next night was a great gray owl. Different owl, same road. Right before my Reiki session, right after my Reiki session. So, like I'm like that to me is kind of weird. So, so the
say the least.
You asked me. So the seeker, I would say that these people are, if they're not doing, so I'm going to call Reiki therapy shaman light, right? So, or shaman like. So shamanism is just like archetype. Everyone's got a different definition of what a shaman might be. But I would say that in our culture, like, we don't have the shaman at the edge of the village like we used to in a previous chapter of human history. But you can get online and Google or look up a Reiki therapist in a second. Yeah. So I don't know what, within the data pool of people who are having owl and UFO experiences, I'll tell you what, those people are thoughtful. They've had spiritual awakenings. They're not the, I mean, they're doing the important good work.
Mm-hmm.
Here, let me tell one story. This woman contacts me and she tells a story. She said she was in her driveway and she was on the phone. I got to tell this one quick because it's kind of complicated. She's on the phone. She's on the driveway. She pulls in and there's an owl in the driveway. And she gets out of the car and she calls her son out. She gets on the phone and she calls her son and says, come out right now. An owl right here. And the owl was on the driveway and it landed in a tree. So then the owl comes and touches her head and scares her son. It's like, Mom, are you okay? And she says, oh, it was so gentle. The owl touched her head. Then this is all kind of mixed up in my mind right now, but right around this time, just before this, she had been to a baseball game, Little League baseball game, and there was just another mother in the neighborhood. She didn't really know her. They're watching the kids are playing. Their two kids are playing baseball. So she turns to the lady next to her and is like, what's going on in your life? And she says, well, it's not good. Like, I need a new kidney or I'm going to die. And the lady, without skipping a beat, says, I'll give you mine. And the lady says, it doesn't work like that. That's very nice that you offered your kidney. Because we have to be compatible. We have to go through blood tests. We have to both see doctors. And she said, I'll go see a doctor. What do I need to do? So she goes see a doctor. And the doctor calls her back later and says, is this your sister? And she goes, no. It's like, like, I'm just looking at the blood sample. Like, wow, you are so close. I was going to ask, is this your twin sister? So she gives up her kidney. Mm-hmm. And during this time, after the owl thing, so this was before giving up the kidney. And after they have sees the owl in the driveway. And a couple days later, she goes on a hike and she comes back from the hike. And she says she hikes with her metaphysical friend. And they get back and the sun is setting. And there's these bright structured thing with a bright light goes right over the parking lot. And she said, oh, and then everything in the parking lot turned red. The cars turned red. The sky turned red. The trees turned red. The asphalt turned red. Which I've heard before. I've heard it as green, never red, but I've heard everything changes color. So she has an owl and a UFO thing side by side. And then I said, what'd you do? Like, who were you talking with on the phone? Like, so the question I ask is, what was going on leading up to the event? What changed after? So leading up to the event, owl, UFO, like right, but when she was about to see the owl, who were you talking to with on the phone? So I was talking with my dad. I said, I told my dad, I'm really going to do this. I'm going to give my kidney away to this lady in the neighborhood. And then afterwards, she gave her kidney away. They're both, how's your health? Great. My health is great. This woman's doing great. Do you have any regrets? None at all. Like, why did you say that to the lady at the baseball game? She said, I have no idea. I just said it and it felt right. And it never felt wrong. I do not have to ask if this lady is a Reiki healer. Right? Wow. You talk about a powerful, selfless form of healing, giving your own kidney away. I don't know if I would do that, but wow. So this is the mood. Earlier I said, like, I can't tell for sure, but I can have a pretty good sense when someone's telling me the real deal because it has a flavor and mood imbued in the story. This woman's story is the personification of that flavor and mood. It's got a UFO, it's got an owl, it's got a selfless act, it's got healing. This is what I'm getting. So you ask, so all I can say, the flavor and mood of these stories is so hopeful for and that these people are seekers. They want to be, if they're not outright healers, like I'm not a healer, I don't have any healing abilities. And then people say like, how many, like all I can do really is talk to people on the phone and say, you're not alone. I've heard not necessarily that story, but a story like that. People contact me and say, like, am I going crazy? And I say, no, you're not alone. So 95% of what they need is just me to say, you are not alone. So I recognize that I'm providing solace for those people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's those are very healing words for sure. And they're, sometimes more powerful than any Reiki session, depending on where someone is in their lives.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm really happy to finish on that beautiful, inspiring note. I actually have one tiny little story to tell. It's really quick.
Sure.
Because I'll be honest, I've never had an owl experience myself.
The night is young.
I've seen an owl when I was a kid, but it didn't have that flavor. But something did happen while it's really like just a funny story, by the way. Something did happen while I was doing research for for this episode. I was because I was listening to a bunch of interviews that you gave in the past, and some of them they're just audio, so like I'm not gonna just sit on a chair and look at the wall for an hour, 2 hours, whatever. Actually, much more than that, because I listen to a lot of them. So I was playing a video game at the same time, and so I don't know if people know this game. It's a very popular game called Witcher 3. They made a series on Netflix with the character in the last few years. But it's basically just a big open world, and there's like the story is super important in that game, and that's why it's well known. But also there's like you just walk around in that on the map, and there's like little question marks, and if you go there's just like a bunch of monsters, and you just kill them, and so you don't have to think really about what you're doing. So I can easily focus on something else, And I would play like that, and sometimes I'd stop because you're saying something like that for some reason, like it resonates, and I just note the question, whatever. So I'm listening to this interview. Can't remember which one it was, but right, because you're walking around, and then when you get to a new area, the name of the area is written on the screen. So I'm listening to this interview, and right when it stopped, I get in front of a little cavern, and it says Owl Eye Grotto. Owl Eyes Grotto.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the end, like, okay, thank you, Mike. Goodbye. Owl Eyes Grotto. So, I mean, like, as I said, like if I saw an owl in my window, I would freak out because I'm in Montreal. But that was as close as it got for me, Mike.
Well, so that's, to me, I'm like totally like owls on lunchboxes, owls on like, billboards. Like, we don't live in the forest anymore, right? So if we had all lived back in the forest and we were in our little loincloths, and we'd be seeing owls more often, but we don't live there. We live in this other place, so we see owls symbolically. The owl on the door is a symbol. It's just wood grain. I know it's just wood grain, but it's. Have you seen the picture? You have seen the picture, right?
I've seen it.
Yeah. It's
but there will be show notes, by the way. So I'll when I listen back to the interview, like everything that I can link to. If people go on my website for that episode, they can see all this. So
I'll make sure to send you the URL for that blog post. Yeah. So
cool, perfect. All right. Oh man, that was so good. It went by so quickly. It's almost 2 hours. It's my longest episode yet. I'm getting good at this. I didn't forget this time. Mike, where can people find you?
They can, if you want to, you can Google UFO owl. I'm the first thing that comes up. But the next 30 things underneath that is also me, so you'll find me right away. I have a website, which is MikeClelland.com. All one word, Mike Clelland, Clelland. If you can't remember that, just type in UFO owl. That webpage is going to come right up. From that webpage, it'll link to books. It'll link. I hosted a couple podcasts over the years. All those podcasts are linked. You got to kind of click through a little bit, but it's all linked. The Amazon books, my old blog, some illustration work that I had done. Oh, and then I also want to say I wrote a novel. I think I mentioned it here, but I wrote a novel. Oh, that's okay. I'm like, oh man. But it's been selling really well. The novel is linked on the webpage. That novel is a fictional story about owls and UFOs. I never used the word UFO once in the story. Like my goal was to tell the story and someone would read it who has no interest in UFOs and wouldn't even know it was a UFO story. And it's selling pretty well, but like, oh my word, the reviews on Amazon are really, really humbling. People like, I was trying to do something and people got it. So that's been the big thing the last 6 months or so. I've been trying to push that forward. So
yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get into that.
Oh no, don't worry at all. This was a great interview. Don't worry at all. Yeah. I'm not trying to sell anything, but just you asked how to get a hold of me, and that novel is linked right there too. So
cool.
There, I said enough. So
well, that's one thing, like I was hearing you talk about the book, and I was very curious to talk about inspiration also with you. So there's a whole bunch of things that we didn't get to address. So if you want to come back on the show,
anytime.
All right, yeah. So we'll be in touch, I guess. Yeah.
Great.
It was great. Well, great for me.
Good. And say goodnight to your cat.
I will. I won't have a choice.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Mike. So you've made it to the end of this Hopscotch Chronicles podcast episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. And I thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you're benefiting in a way or another from this conversation. So if you'd like to follow my work, whether on this podcast or my personal work, you can go to Twitter or X and follow me at Domi_Valet, DOMI_Valet. Same username for Instagram, if you prefer that platform. You can also go to the official website for the podcast, which is hopscotchchronicles.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast as well as my personal work, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. The address is patreon.com/Dominic Valet, DOMINIC Valet, VALLEE. There you'll find video and audio versions of the episodes without any commercials, as well as special episodes on every Sunday where I take my Sunday afternoon tea with you guys. All right, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep reaching for the light.